Good morning and welcome to this series of Transformative, and I'm very, very, very pleased to have with me Andrew Tomlinson, who is a set designer. Is that the best
set
description of what you're doing?
Works for me, yep.
The thing that you probably will not know is that Andrew is on nearly every shoot, but you don't often see what he's done. Yeah, so he could be the motor in Kanye West's Bound 2 on the motorbike, or he could be royal stand-in for royal portraits, but all these things you wouldn't know. And part of the reason to do this series of Transformative is to shine a light on a lot of other people in the industry that don't normally get perhaps A, the recognition or the acknowledgement of their work that they do. Anyway, that was a long introduction. Hi Andy, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
So this is our first picture.
Ah, fantastic, yeah, my first ever fashion show. I met a fantastic man called Michael Howells. Little did I know, having done work experience on his film for a couple of weeks at first, that he would be the person that I'd spend the next 10 years with, happily being mentored. Michael was formidable, terrifying to meet at first, real presence of a man, and camp as Christmas, you know, he dressed very flamboyantly. I mean, not as flamboyantly now I look back now, but when I first met him, like I say, as a fairly naive lad coming from Yorkshire, I was like, wow, okay, this guy's interesting. He had that fantastic like headmaster way about him at first, you know, but he clearly desperately wanted to impart his knowledge onto people who wanted to listen. And I was the perfect blank canvas for that. Michael came up to me and said, oh, I'm very good friends with John Galliano, so he's the head designer at Dior, and we're going to do a Dior show. Actually, we're also going to do, under his own brand, his own show as well. I quickly came to realise when we were doing Fashion Week every week that often Dior would be one of the opening shows of Fashion Week, and the Galliano show would be at the end of the week, which just about gave us enough time to prepare both. And it's Madame Butterfly that we're talking about, this one. I don't remember the names of all of them, but I do remember you show me a picture and I can tell you everything you need to know about every bit of that show. And I think Michael, I mean, he liked to do this anyway, but why not throw everything in the kitchen sink if somebody will let you, you know, let's add more and more. And I think he really wanted to announce that him, you know, to a certain extent, and it was all under the guise of, I want John to look fucking as good as he can. I believe in what John does, I completely believe in the world he's creating, and I think I'm the person that can really make that world. So I remember him saying, like, wouldn't it be amazing if, you know, instead of the models just, I want to make a moment of the way the models enter onto the stage to begin with. Also, for this show, I don't want to do just an up and down, I think we should do a route. And I think Michael, thinking about it, he knew straight away, and you'll know this, that no matter how incredible the fashion show is that you go to, if you're lucky enough, if you're the elite that gets invited to these things, you take in all that atmosphere. Nobody else gets to see that. I mean, they film the shows, but it looks like this. They don't actually film it like a movie. And the bit that will be remembered, or the only way people will know, is the photographer stood at the end of the catwalk, taking the picture. That's it. That's the image you've got for that show. And I think Michael was like, well, fuck, that's not happening. So he immediately went, each one of these areas, we'll put some photographers there, and we'll put some here, and we'll put some there. And he was like, immediately that means when we read the papers next week, there'll be 4 different images for this show that we get to see. It won't just be one. And I was like, oh, that's clever. He wanted to do a revolve so that each model was revolved and put on, and they had their own little moment, presenting them.
This is a huge chair in the background.
So the chair was what we regard as the Dior chair. If you go into the salon, you know, that's the chair. You know, he was like, if I think of Dior, I have to think of iconic things. Because also, John's giving him a mood. So he'd obviously talked about this sort of Japanese influence and bits and pieces, but probably not much more. And Michael was really good at going, okay, well, I'll fill the gaps in between John and Dior. You had to make a statement in a moment, so you can't just have a normal chair, surely you have to have a chair that's 15 foot high. We'd do our model box, and he was like, right, let's jump on the Eurostar, and we'll go and present it to John. And he was like, why don't you present it to him? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, well, why don't you talk through our idea? And I was thinking, it's not our idea, it's your idea. I don't know who I'm talking to. I hope this is just you winding me up before we get there. And when we get in the room and I'm carrying it, I might just hold the model high enough that nobody can see my face and you have to talk. And John, certainly to look at it at first, fit the bill. He wore clothes that looked like he'd made or altered himself, like a character that could have been from a different generation immediately by the way he was looking. But he was excited. And that kind of like, camp giggly side to John that you immediately get when he's clearly excited by what's happening. Him and Michael, it was nice, they were mates, so they'd embrace, and then he'd be like, what have you got to show me?
Yeah.
So already I was a bit like, this isn't the kind of way that I often go into presenting a job to someone. You know, you're clearly looking at mates working together. But what was abundantly clear was John almost didn't need to see what, it's not that he didn't care, but he just knew Michael's got this. Like we know each other well enough that, and almost I think it's a tease going, if I just give him a handful of words, I can't wait to see what he'll do with that. And it was this lovely world where Michael, that was the ideas machine, you know, we'd eventually get to a point where we're understood, we're all on the same team here. I wonder what that crazy English guy is going to have come up next, because it was a playground for him, I think. Yeah. And he'd always do it, he'd somehow nail it, that it still worked in John's world. And it never ceased to amaze me, the press release that you hear John say in his little room at the end of the show. Yeah. There's no way that those words were said 1 month before when he was thinking about, but you know, that's all nicely come together as a part of, this obviously is where it came from, but I'm going to very articulatedly now explain to you. There will have been some conversation, but some of it is just something between those two that they had an understanding that they just, whether it's I know he'll like this or it just worked, you know.